Human psychology, eh?
Yeah, human psychology has got to be one of the most interesting things there is. Like, there's so many complexities in the world to spend time thinking about, but how the human brain freaking works and why it works the way it does has got to be the most interesting.
Yeah, and that's something that's fun about trading, really, is that it's got a large aspect of that in it. So,
Yeah, I mean, that's most of it, I would say.
hmm.
All right, well, anyway, let's just get started with the book presentation. People will hopefully start to dribble in. So what I decided to do, like I said, because it was such a complex amount of information, but it was really just a very simple idea of recognizing what black swans are and why you might find value in life and recognizing them. I tried to keep the presentation really simple, just a couple of quick ideas I'm going to talk about, and then we'll open it up to an open table conversation between the three of us. All right, so here we go. So just a quick summary of the book in case you guys didn't get a chance. I thought there might be some people who didn't read it that were here. The book focuses on the extreme impact of rare and unpredictable outlier events and our human tendency to simplistically explain or come up with simplistic explanations for these events after the fact. That's one of the things that's really important about black swans that differentiates them from just like a random thing that happens. A black swan is a thing where there's no way ahead of time you could see it coming, but after the fact, you're convinced that it's there. So the first quote I wanted to start with from the book: you need a story to displace a story. One thing that Taleb talks about quite a bit in this book is the idea that facts and pieces of information are very valuable, of course, in life. But the problem, the downside with facts and information is it's hard for people to remember them. It's hard for people to store that information. But stories is something that is very easy for people to remember. It's something that they can connect with. It makes sense to them. And so it kind of sticks in their mind much better than just pieces of facts and information. So like, earlier today during the live stream, we were talking about, how pretentious he seems with like his style of writing and the way he makes it out like he's better than everybody. But that's all part of his story. That's part of his way of trying to convince you to pay attention to the information and connect with it. So try to overlook the pretentiousness and just see that's him trying to be clever or funny to really help that information stick. Rather than just judging him based on his pretentiousness alone. All right, so what is a black swan? These are the specific characteristics that make a black swan a black swan. They're outliers that can't be reasonably expected to happen based on past events, okay? So it's one of those things where it's not unimaginable that it could happen, but nobody would have thought of it. No one's going to think of it. It's just one of those things that wouldn't have crossed anyone's mind because it's never happened before. Then you've got, they often or always have a very profound effect on society and the world. These are not just little random events that take place and who cares. These are big, important, fundamental changes that affect the future moving forward. And always is the case with black swans. Although the events are unpredictable, humans tend to explain them in hindsight as if they could be understood perfectly and predicted, right? People always act like after the event takes place, oh, well, we all should have seen that coming. The mortgage crisis in 2008 is such a great example. We all should have seen this coming. We all should have known that all this leverage and all these derivatives were going to cause the market to implode. Why didn't anyone think of this? Well, nobody thought of it because it had never existed before. It had never happened before. The housing market had done nothing but go up forever. And so who thought you could cause the whole market to explode through this firecracker effect because of these derivatives? It just, because it had never happened, no one even considered it. Of course, now it seems so obvious. So that's kind of what makes a black swan thing a black swan. So what can be a black swan? Pretty much anything. An event can be a black swan. 9/11 was an event. That was a black swan. Nobody saw it coming, right? Sure, there had been examples of people taking over planes in the past, but they never turned them into suicide bombers, right? There had been suicide bombers in the past, in, the Japanese in World War II. But again, nobody had ever done it with a commercial plane. So a very simple solution, just putting a bulletproof door with a lock on it in front of the cockpit, we could have completely prevented 9/11 from happening. So why didn't we do that? Because just no one ever thought of it ahead of time. It never crossed anybody's mind that you could take over a commercial plane and turn it into a bomb. So a person can be a black swan, right? You could take like an Elon Musk type of person, Da Vinci, Einstein. They don't have to be smart in particular. John F. Kennedy, whatever, Lincoln. You just have to take a person who nobody would have thought of is like going to enter the world at this moment in this time and bring their perspective and bring their whatever effect they have on the world. And then afterward, everybody always thinks, well, it was obvious that that person was going to step up. It was obvious that Lincoln was going to bring, America together to end slavery. Well, no, it wasn't. Not at the time. At the time, it was fucking crazy, and no one could have thought it was going to happen. But after the fact, of course, it seems obvious, right? A company can be a black swan. So certain companies that fundamentally change things, I would put Amazon in that category, right? As a company that fundamentally changed the way we shop. They fundamentally changed the way businesses sell products. They fundamentally changed everything, and nobody saw it coming. If we go back to, the year 2000 and you look at people talk about Amazon, they were sure that company was going to fail because it was just some stupid online bookstore. How could it ever compete with Barnes and Nobles that had all these thousands of stores all over the country? Nobody could have predicted that this little company was going to be a black swan that was going to fundamentally change everything. You've got services, same thing. The internet is a great example of that, right? Like some new thing, electricity, like some new thing comes along. No one predicts it ahead of time. Everybody fights against it when it's happening, but then they all afterwards say, well, it's obvious. It's obvious we switched from horses to automobiles. That makes sense. But now that we're trying to switch from combustion automobiles to electronic automobiles, oh, that's crazy. That'll never work. It's da-da-da-da-da. It's all the same process going over and over and over again, where people don't see it coming. They deny it while it's happening. And then after the fact, they act like they knew all along, and they'll always know in the future. So that's what a black swan is. Okay, so some of the takeaways I thought we would want to consider here today. Be open to the unexpected. Those who are the least aware of a black swan coming will suffer the most from the often already extreme circumstances, right? So the mortgage crisis is a great example. If you lost your house because of that, it doesn't even matter that you had home insurance, because your mortgage payments randomly changing and tripling overnight, and the value of your house collapsing so that you can't sell it to pay off the mortgage. Like, no, there is no insurance for that. There is no way to protect yourself from that. So when they got hit with that, they literally lost their home. At the moment that they're dealing with this crisis of how am I going to survive this, they don't even have a place to live. Whereas the people who caused the financial crisis in 2008, the bankers, the millionaires who invented these derivatives so that they could make a fortune, putting all the risk on the individual mortgage owners, they didn't pay the price. They weren't hurt by it. They got bailed out by the banks, and they made huge bonuses, and they did great. And that's the way it always is in every black swan thing. It's the people who are the least prepared who are the worst affected by it every single time. Okay. So there are good black swans and there are bad black swans, right? There are things that can happen that can have a fundamental change, which makes everything worse as a consequence. And then there is things that can happen that will fundamentally make things better as a consequence. And so the way you think about these black swans when you're looking for them in life is you want to use the bad ones. You want to be insured against that happening. And the good ones, you want to be positioned to take advantage of those good opportunities. So here's some examples of those for the bad black swans. You got the 9/11 attacks. You got the 2008 financial crisis. You got COVID, right? In any of these situations, if you would have known ahead of time that they were going to happen, you could have made a fortune off of them, right? You could have made a killing off of any one of the COVID. You could have made a killing just buying toilet paper. If you'd have been the guy who knew to have the toilet paper ahead of COVID, you would have made a killing, right? But you'll never know. That's the point of the black swans. You will never know they're coming ahead of time. So you want to protect yourself from everything. You want to have a way that no matter what happens, you are protected. So you think about this in every aspect of your life, your living situation, your home. What happens if something goes wrong with that? What happens if your house gets hit by lightning tomorrow, lights on fire and burns to the ground? Where are you going to go? Where are you going to stay? Who are you going to stay with? What are you going to do? How are you going to find a new place? Having plans in place for everything that could go wrong in life helps protect you from those things. Having some form of insurance, whatever that may be. In trading, there is either literal insurance where you like buy options to insure yourself against a move in an underlying asset, or there is just risk management, guaranteeing that I've got a stop loss in place. So even if the sky falls at this very moment and suddenly the market reverses, I can't be hurt by it. I'll be stopped out and I won't be hurt. Having that sort of protection in place is really, really important. And being able to recognize that black swans exist allow you to think that way. And then there's the good side of black swans, right? There's companies like Amazon or Apple who invent a new technology. And by you having the willingness to understand that the reason no one else gets it, the reason no one else thinks Amazon's going to be successful, the reason nobody else gives a fuck about the fact that they just put a phone in your pocket, okay? The reason nobody cares about any of that is because it hasn't existed before. And people just, if it's not a thing from the past that they already knew, they just can't even imagine it. They don't even have the imagination to even perceive the success it could have. Think about Bitcoin, right? If you'd have been able to see the advantage of that, to recognize what no one else did in 2013 or 14 or 15 or 16, you could have made an absolute killing by now. Think about the Kardashians, okay? The Kardashians are a human version of a black swan. There's no way anyone could have seen them coming. But if you were the television producer who saw this story of this girl who has a famous dad and she made a sex tape with a famous rapper, and you thought to yourself, this is a weird, interesting family, and I'm going to make a TV show about them. No one knows them. No one cares about them. Everyone's talking shit about her, but you have the ability to think this could be huge, and you get in early, you can benefit from that random black swan that was and is the Kardashians. Okay. Next idea to consider. Don't use the past to explain the future. Now, this is a really tough one for me, since my entire basis for trading every single day is using the past to predict the future. Thinking in probabilities is literally my whole thing. So in a couple of slides, we'll go into it a little more detail, but let me just explain his perspective on it first, okay? Because everything is random, everything in the world is so random and so complex, and there is always uncertainty, our brain tries to create a basis for understanding the reality of the now based on things that we can be certain of, which are things from the past. We always weave a narrative for ourselves that makes sense based on historical data, and we expect that the future will simply always unfold as it has in the past. It's just the way people are. They always expect things are going to play out exactly the same, okay? Don't be a turkey. The example that he uses in the book that's really great is the idea of a turkey. A turkey is living its life. It's out on the free range. It's just hanging out in the sunshine, eating bits of corn. I don't know, do whatever turkeys do for fun. And it's having a wonderful life. It has no idea that tomorrow is Thanksgiving. That turkey has no clue that at any moment his life is going to come to an end, and there's absolutely nothing that this turkey can do about it. This turkey is desperately hopeless in this situation. You as a human, because you're not a turkey, can at the very least, you can't stop Thanksgiving from coming. You'll never be able to predict when some terrible thing is going to happen. But at least if you're aware of it, you're not walking around just pecking away, living your life thinking nothing bad is ever going to happen. You're at least preparing for when something bad does happen. The same thing is what is at play within human beings in the stock market. The very same concept is what's happening when everybody was saying a year ago that stonks only go up, right? And that the stock market never goes down. Well, now they've all learned their lesson and they've gotten wrecked because they didn't see this coming, purely because they got into investing after 2008. When stonks did only ever go up. The worst thing that could ever happen in the history of the world happened. The whole country went into the whole world went into lockdowns at the same time, shut down the world's economy, and the stock market bounced right back and went to new all-time highs. Of course, a generation of people thought stonks could only go up, right? Because they only base their understanding from what they've seen in the recent past. Don't think in probabilities. It is impossible to be in possession of the entirety of available information. Small unknown variance in the data could have a huge impact. What he calls the lucid fallacy. So game theory and predictive models are based on quantified forms of information that gravitate towards mathematical purity and are failing to take into account the known unknowns. Right? He talks a lot about the unknown unknowns, the things you can't even imagine you need to be worried about, right? Because it's impossible. You can't take those things into account. Then you're developing a framework based on history or based on probabilities or statistics is guaranteed to be flawed because there's unpredictable variance. Okay, so let's just pause for a second. Let's pause the Nassim Taleb way of looking at the world. And let's just take a quick second to get back to Charles's way of looking at the world, particularly when it comes to day trading. Everything I do is based on probabilities. Every decision I make is based on, in the past, when I've seen this happen and this occur, the following results will occur. When we create single prints, we go to backfill them. When we create a poor high, we go back to repair it. Whatever, right? That's my whole basis for making a decision. But here's the thing. I don't need it to be perfect, right? I don't need to always know correctly what the market is doing. My system it's okay if my system is full of flaws because I have a protection for those flaws. That protection is risk management, right? I can think the market's going to go repair a poor high, but even if I'm wrong, I won't lose more than 2% of my account in the trade. So when you hear him talk about the idea of not being able to think in probabilities because there's no guarantee, that's fine, right? You don't need a guarantee to make money as a trader. You just need an edge. You just need a little bit of an advantage, something that just gives you a little bit of an edge. You don't need absolute certainty. What his problem is fundamentally as a person is Nassim Taleb wants certainty. He wants a world where he's guaranteed to be right. And that's what he pursued in his trading, was he looked for a way to trade where it was absolutely certain that he was right. In a world where anything can happen, literally the only thing that's guaranteed to be right is a bet that anything can happen. Right? That's the only way his brain can wrap around approaching a market. But my brain has no problem accepting imperfections in my system as long as my system pays me, right? As long as it's consistently profitable, I'm fine with it being wrong sometimes, okay? And the example that he uses to kind of clarify this, which I thought was a great example, is the coin toss example. If you could make a coin that was perfectly weighted, guaranteed exactly the same weight on both sides, you could essentially formulate a calculation that there would be a 50-50 odds that it would land on heads or tails, right? And probably with enough rounds of data, if you kept flipping the coin and flipping the coin and flipping the coin, you would probably find 50% of the time it lands on heads and 50% of the time it lands on tails. But the theory of randomness and the way that little tiny things, the wind in the air, the person who's flipping the coin's hand getting a little bit more tired with every flip. There's so many tiny little variables connected to it that if you were to have somebody flip a coin 100 times, they would never get exactly 50 times heads and 50 times tails. Does that make sense? Some of the times you have them flip it 100 times, some of them 70% of the time it'll be heads, 30 it'll be tails. Some of them it'll be vice versa. Some of them, one of those random times, if you have them flip 100 times, if you have them flip 100 times, 100 times, in one of those times, 99 of them is going to land on heads and 1 time on tails. It's inevitable. If you keep going enough times, you will get a one random collection of 100 where 99 times it lands on heads and 1. It's just, that's a fact of just probabilities and the way it works. And so if I tell you there's a 50-50 chance that this coin is going to land on heads or tails, I measured it, it's exactly the same weight, it's a guarantee. And then we flipped it 100 times and 99% of the times it didn't work. It landed on the same side. You would go, your numbers are bullshit. Like your logic is sound, your mathematics is sound, but in the practical world, it doesn't actually work out that way. In the practical world, it's the perfect mathematical model doesn't play out that way because there's too many tiny little variables that are at effect and playing into it. All right. So just one quick section I wanted to read here. He says, I stick my neck out and make a claim against many of our habits of thought that our world is dominated by the extreme, the unknown, and the very improbable. And all the while we spend our time engaged in small talk, focused on the now and the repeated. This implies the need to use an extreme event as a starting point and not treat it as an exemption to be pushed under the rug. So this is exactly the opposite of what I literally just said about my own day trading. That for me, the one random time I think the market's going to go back down to repair that poor low, and then some piece of news comes out and the market shoots up 100 points and never comes back for that poor low, I don't care. You know, I'm like, whatever, you know, that one time my probabilities didn't work out. But to him, that's unfathomable. To him, the very idea that, you know, that you could accept that kind of randomness in your life is just unfathomable. So that's why he chooses to focus on the extremes, since they're a guarantee. You're guaranteed something extreme is going to happen. Make that your focus. Okay. And then I also make a bolder and more annoying claim that in spite of our progress and growth in knowledge, or perhaps because of such progress and growth, the future will be increasingly less predictable, while both human nature and social science seem to conspire to hide the idea from us. Do you know what is the most perfect example I can think of to just, man, I got to turn on my air conditioning. I'm starting to sweat. Under pressure here. You know, the most perfect example of this is like social media, right? Social media was supposed to be the great unifier. It made us think we were genuinely improving our lives. Now we can connect with all our friends. We can share what's important to us. We can, you know, communicate in a new and exciting way. We were sure that this was going to make life better and that we understood how it was going to make life better. But now, a decade into the experiment of social media, what do we now know? It's causing anxiety and depression and like serious rifts in society. It's causing problems in the way that we access and understand information. It's like, so this is what is always going to happen in the future. Things are going to continue to change at a faster and faster and more rapid rate. And all along, we will believe that we're getting a better understanding of things. But in truth, we are making our universe more and more complex and bringing in more uncertainty. So, I mean, just to have some fun with the idea, let's talk about Neuralink, right? Elon Musk's little pet project so that we can plug computers directly into our brains. It sounds great. We think we know what that'll mean. Oh, well, we can process more information more quickly, so we can be more efficient. We can achieve more. This is going to be fantastic. We'll be able to communicate easier, but we can't fathom. We cannot even right now fathom the results of what could happen. We don't know what the black swan of plugging our fucking human brain into an electronic computer will be. And that's what's so crazy is the further we move along in society and the more we think we understand the world, the more we think that we're making sense of things and we're putting the pieces together, really all we're doing is making life more and more difficult and more complex. Another great example of this, I've talked about this on the channel before, but when I was working on cruise ships out of Australia for a couple of years, one place we used to go to all the time was a set of islands called Vanuatu. Okay. These people are the poorest people on earth. They have nothing. They live completely tribal lives. They have no clothing. They live in huts. They have nothing. Okay. And they are the happiest people I've ever met. They are the most joyous, sweetest, most amazing, kindest human beings you will ever meet in your life. They have no crime. They have no violence. Nobody steals anything from anyone. Nobody is jealous of anyone. Nobody, like all of the terrible things that exist in society, okay, that we all experience on a day-to-day basis with this lust and greed and desire to constantly conquer and own and to do everything that we have to do. They have none of that in their society. They just get up in the morning, climb a tree, get a coconut, hang out with their friends on the beach all day. Their life is so simple that it's amazing that they have this incredible existence. And those of us that live in this complex world where we have science and computers and, societies with these complex things, we're miserable. We're working ourselves to death, absolutely fucking miserable all the time because we've made life so complex that we don't understand it at all. We've lost the understanding of the basics of how to live. Climb a tree, have a coconut, and hang out with your friend, man. That's life. That's the thing to do, not go buy the new whatever. All right. So I just want to finish up with a couple of quick quotes that I liked and that I thought might spark some ideas. We tend to use knowledge as therapy. Okay. This is the idea that when we're given new information, we take that new information and we find a way to connect it with a story we want a connection to in our heads. So if I say to you, we just created a poor high. If you're bearish, you're going to think that's a reason to get short for the push away from the poor high. And if I say we just created a poor high and you're bullish, you think that's a reason to wait for the support so that I can get in to go repair that poor high, right? The information itself is often not used as purely information. The information is used as a way to comfort our desire to understand the world. And so we're always trying to do that. We're trying to force the information to fit our narrative. And that's very dangerous. Ideas come and go, but stories stay. This is one thing, I've talked about in the past. A lot of times when I'm live streaming, I'll use examples like I'll say, this is weak hands selling here, trying to do blah, blah, blah. And somebody will respond and say something like, well, how do you know? How do you know it's all weak hands? How do you know there's not somebody big getting in here? And it's like, of course I don't know. Who gives a fuck? It's not about being absolutely certain that this exact thing is happening. It's just about coming up with a story that I can tell myself so that I have some sort of understanding of what's happening. Okay, these are weak hands. I know how to deal with that. Do I have to be exactly right? No, I just need some kind of understanding. And that gives me the insight. Prediction, not narration, is the real test of understanding of the world. There's no better example of this than comparing being a trader to being an analyst on CNBC, right? Having to guess what a market is going to do ahead of time and put real skin in the game and take real risk will always outpower and outweigh and be more effective than somebody whose job it is to analyze what happens after the fact and try to explain it. So if you're looking for somebody to go to in life for knowledge or information, figure out who has skin in the game in that narrative and go to them. Don't go to the person who's the expert on the thing, who has spent their whole life studying the thing academically. They're full of shit. They're always full of shit. The real value comes from the person who does it with their hands in the real world every day. They truly understand the thing, not the academic. The inability to predict outliers implies the inability to predict the course of history, right? And this is just one more way of explaining, because there's so much randomness and so many variables, it's impossible to know what's going to happen. If it's impossible to know what's going to happen, it's impossible to predict. So if you can't predict, protect, right? Cover your ass for anything. I think this is the last one. Yeah. Okay. I will repeat the following until I am hoarse. It is contagion that determines the fate of a theory in social science, not the validity. Okay. Let's get back to our example of the Kardashians. The Kardashians are fucking billionaires right now with a B. They have billions of dollars of money. Not because they're good for society, not because they're super, they're moving us forward as a species or making life better in any way, shape, or form. They're a contagion. They just caught on. And in our modern society, we're more aware of that than ever before. Everything can go viral. And all that matters is what goes viral, right? The concept has nothing to do with what has value or doesn't have value. It's just about what catches on. So if you're trying to plan a stock portfolio for the future, just going based off the fundamentals of a company is not going to tell you what company is going to blow up. What company, there were lots and lots of online marketplaces. Nothing could have told you Amazon was going to be the winner. Right? There are lots and lots of computer companies. Nobody told you that it was going to be Apple or it was going to be Microsoft or whatever that was going to be the winner. So you have to just be aware of that. Don't be convinced because your theory is the best, your information is the best, that it has to work. Just whatever happens is what will happen. And it's as simple as that. All right. Wow, I did not expect that to take a half an hour. I'm so sorry, guys. Thank you so much for sitting through it. Let's open it up to an open table conversation. If anybody's got anything they want to talk about.
Yeah, thanks for that, Charles. That was a good summary of what was in there. Some good points. I'll kick it off. I just had a couple of thoughts that come to mind from the book and what you were talking about, if I may share. Does that sound good?
Go for it.
The one that sticks with me before the book and through the book was how to word it is the victors write history as such. So whoever wins kind of writes what happens. So you don't really understand. So it makes the Black Swan that happened as such look predictable, which I quite like. Things through time. So what am I trying to say there? So yeah, I think it was just showing that all the other things that happened we just don't know about. So it just expanded my mind into more things that could happen. The thing that also I found interesting through your talking was the mortgage example you were giving. Reminds me of trading, and I think I do that a lot, where you can look at the charts afterwards and you go, well, if I was trading, I would have made so much money in that session because it clearly did this and clearly did that. So, but you don't, when you're in that moment in time, you don't know if it's going up or down. So it's just, and I think that's really the seduction of trading is you can learn some basics and you go, oh, it crossed this line, it did this, I would have made 100 points. It was so easy. But when you're in that moment. And I think that's what you do well, is kind of embracing the black swan and just telling yourself a story, and it keeps you sane, because you go, oh, I could do this, I could do that. I have my stop in place. If it doesn't work against me, don't get too hard on yourself. And I think that's been a valuable thing for me. I guess a little bit on myself, just briefly, was I stopped working about 6 years ago, but we got a couple of businesses. But one of my things is I was an engineer, mechanical engineer. So my whole job was statistics and Six Sigma and charts and graphs and predictability and having safety factors and reliability. So it's been a long time to kind of dig that out of me as such, because it kind of showing that the world isn't black and white, is how I say it. There's a lot of gray. So
did you ever experience black swans in that, things that you couldn't have predicted taking place?
Well, no, not really. I think because in that situation, our job is to avoid that. So let's say I was an automotive engineer as such, as one of my jobs. We kind of spend, you take 4 years to develop a car. So the idea is, I guess, for that 4-year period is to remove the black swans by the time you release it to the market. But I guess within that 4-year period of testing it, you would have events happen that you weren't predicting. So yes, I guess I did. But in some ways, that was our job, is to go, well, oh, that failed. Oh, well, we'll make it different, or we'll fix it. So
yeah, that's what I'm saying. You guys built that system to handle the black swans. All of the testing was to get through all of those things that could go wrong.
Yes, and then we can easily look at vehicles that we know that have been, I guess, recalls basically are black swan events where the engineers didn't predict that to happen, and it's got to the point where they have to recall the vehicle. So each of those would be black swans, because why would you release a vehicle to the market knowing that you have to, bring it back in? And then even that's why the Ford Pinto, I guess, was a big example in America, where they understood the black swan event could kill someone, but then they still released it because the payout to those victims was cheaper than fixing the problem. So that's a whole nother discussion. I guess I've got a couple of points, but I'll do one more so I don't hold the whole chat. Was my existence itself is an extreme of circumstance. So me being here itself is a black swan event. So I thought that was quite a good point, which goes both ways. It's like to cherish what we have as a person, and live every moment as its best, because it's so fortunate that we're here, but also to understand that you could not have predicted that I was existing at this point in time in this state, with my family and with my partner, and everything like that. So yeah, it kind of brought it back to myself and how I live my life. So I thought that was interesting. So
yeah, I love that. That's great. Yeah, bringing it back to feeling fortunate about all of the random things that had to take place for you to even be alive, to have made it to here, to have been, your jobs, your wife, the people you've met, the relationship you've had, everything to get you where you are. Any moment, it all could have gone a totally different way. It's
yes,
kind of amazing.
Yeah, that's right. And it does, yeah, it's the randomness of everything. And I think we try to bring it back to trading, and that's where, yeah, as I said, I think it's still those points where they've been having, I feel like they've been having a lot lately, though I'm fairly limited in experiences, the news is bad, the stocks go up, or it rockets up, and you go, well, that doesn't make any logical sense. But it's just releasing that and just trying your best to take advantage of it if you can. So
there you go. Fantastic. Anybody else got something they want to share? Thank you, Ben.
Yeah, sure. I'll jump in. Can you guys hear me pretty good?
Yes, sir.
Outstanding. This book kind of, struck a chord with me, just from the standpoint of, similar to what Ben kind of mentioned, my own personal life. I come from a military background. I did 15 years in the Army and multiple deployments. So in essence, you have to mentally prepare for all contingencies. And that's how I look at trading as a whole as well. And look for the little small nuances that could affect your day trading, your monthly trading, or even future trading opportunities. So this book really kind of emphasized that. But the biggest thing that I took out of it, the story about Fat Tony. I don't know if you guys remember that. It was the fact that he looked at the world and was able to kind of, I won't say manipulate, but able to use people's weaknesses or their visions of what they wanted for his benefit. And I believe, that's pretty much how the world works and encompasses. And then the additional to that is the process of over results and linear progression that he emphasized. I think most people, especially when it comes to trading, they, like what you mentioned, Charles, they want something solid. They want a foolproof method where it tells them, hey, buy here, sell here, and everything's going to be okay, instead of looking at it from the statistical edge and just saying, hey, we got to plan for a contingency. What if this doesn't work? And I think that's where most traders get trapped in. I used to get trapped in that, and I didn't really have a contingency plan established.
For sure. Do you find that there are correlations? I mean, I know that you weren't like studying military history or anything when you were in the military, but there's got to be so many correlations between the way the military approaches war and the way a trader approaches day trading. Am I right in this?
Oh, it's absolutely, you're 100% right. The risk assessment, that's one of the biggest things. Before you even go into a mission, you have to establish a risk assessment for every training exercise, from whether you're doing physical training to a combat mission you're conducting. And in that risk assessment, you have to have the contingency plans written out and plan for the unexpected. And that's something that I apply to trading. I write my risk assessment down. I'm comfortable with risking only 0.5% per trade. That's my risk tolerance. But then you kind of plan out, what if this happens? How do I react to it? If this happens at this point, how do I react to it? And it's something that I kind of carry over into trading.
Yeah. And remaining calm when it doesn't go as planned, and knowing
absolutely.
you'll figure the way out, Very cool. I love that. I think your audio might be cutting out. Anyway, cool shirt. I like the eagle. Anyone else? Thank you for sharing, Robert. Anyone else have anything they want to talk about? Chris, Percy, come on. It's just you two. Anything?
I actually haven't read the book, but I wanted to join you guys for the first time. I missed the previous 2 or 3 meetings, but I love your show, and I'm subscribing. I'm doing much better following your, not your advice, because you don't actually give advice, but your methodology. I'm starting to think a little bit like you, and had been playing with market profile theory for 3-4 years prior to this, but never as concise and as clear as with you, Charles. Really, thanks for that.
Well, no worries. Thanks for stopping by. And you don't need to have read the book. I just told you everything you need to know. Anything can happen. Life is absolute chaos, and do your best to protect yourself. That's the book.
I come from an academic background. I studied in Germany literature and history, and then in the United States economics. So I was never trained to think that anything can happen and to prepare for that randomness. It cost me a lot, because in economics, one is not able, but one is trained to model things. You want to model this just like what the Federal Reserve is doing. Oh, there is no inflation. We have a model that says this has to be temporary, and we put all our money there, and the country's money there too.
Yep.
And then things happen.
Yep. He goes into a lot of detail about that, about the problems between the difference between being a trader who actually has to put money at risk every day in this chaotic random environment, and being an analyst who's looking at it after the fact and trying to explain the story of it. Yeah, you always want to trust the trader. And so that's something you have to learn.
In economics, we always have an explanation for anything, for everything. And we try to predict and we try to model. And I have friends who still here. I live in Lima, Peru. I'm from here. And they work at banks, major banks here. And they have an idea of what is going to happen with the market. That market has to go down because of this, or the market has to go up because of that. And they're always wrong. And they don't get it. And they think because I don't know, 2 out of 10 times they were right. And because they get a salary every month, they are right, or that's the way to think. But it costs me really to think about what you were just talking about, how markets are actually random and you have to be prepared and you don't have to panic when shit happens.
Exactly.
And you have to see what's going on and act on it. It costs me.
Mhm.
It costs me a lot to do that still.
Yeah, well, that's the price of trading, is learning through losing money. But yeah, that's one of the things I really try to help people understand is just staying calm when the market is in a chaotic moment gives you an edge, right? Just the fact that everyone else, the market randomly starts dropping 10 points, boom, 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 it starts to liquidate. All your competition, all your competitors, they're panicking. They're freaking out. They're going, oh no, what's the market doing? What's it gonna, If you can just be calm and say to yourself, okay, we're getting a liquidation break. What do I know historically? Liquidation breaks actually strengthen the market. They actually bring in strong hand buy. Just having the ability to stay calm, to be prepared for the fact that there could be a liquidation break ahead of time so that you're focused when it happens, that alone gives you an edge. And it's a bunch of those little edges that add up to profits. So keep at it, man. You'll get there.
Thanks, Charles. Thank you, guys.
I was thinking before too around your Elon Musk example with the chip.
Neuralink.
It brings up two things for me. One is the iPhone, where they say the human brain can't interpret the difference between an iPhone 1 and an iPhone 2, and an iPhone 3 and an iPhone 4. It isn't a linear progression. An iPhone 12 isn't 12 times better than the iPhone 1. The processing capability, the storage, the camera, everything it's like an exponential rise. And if they really said it was the iPhone 1 trillion, all of a sudden it's like, oh, that doesn't make any sense, So, and then I think the Elon Musk thing is something that we can't predict as humans, is this singularity. If we get to that point where the machine, and it seems to be what we want to do, is head towards that destruction, but where the machinery is more advanced than us and just takes over, it's hard to predict that, because how could you predict that happening? But
Yeah.
I guess we've theorized it, but we don't actually know what it looks like. And I think we would tick over into that without knowing it had occurred, because we don't actually know when their tipping point is. And
Dude, I'm so fascinated with that as a concept. Like, what could go wrong? So obviously the first people that are going to get Neuralinks are the rich and the powerful. So like, what could go wrong there? Well, it could make them
be tribes in Africa first, I think.
Yeah. And so they could instantly become significantly more rich and powerful because they have this superior brain, or maybe the exact opposite. Maybe their ability to process information suddenly makes them deeply depressed and unhappy. And like, then because they're depressed, they start making terrible decisions that has a fallout because they're the rich and powerful to the rest of, like, who fucking knows what's going to happen? It's so random that anything could take place.
No, yeah, you're right. It's a constant battle, isn't it? It's like that kind of that meaning of life as such, where I've been to Vanuatu myself as well, and when I was there, they have 50% unemployment, and the kids carry machetes to school so they can harvest fruit on their walk home, and they've got carver as well, which might help.
Oh yeah, that's the best.
Where was this with the machetes, Chris?
It's in Vanuatu.
It's like a set of islands off of Australia.
Yeah, the set of islands, Australia, like in the Oceania region. So
yeah,
it's just a different way of living. And I think about that quite often. I like to think about different theories, but we don't know. So the victors write history as such. I don't know if this is how this is going to land, but if World War II went differently and Germany won, I don't know if the world would be better or worse.
Oh yeah, no, I know exactly what you mean. You never know how the one event might lead to another event that might lead. That's like the butterfly effect theory that you start getting into there, It
doesn't feel like we're in a great spot right now with the capitalist type society we've set up. So I don't know. Like
Yeah,
maybe
or it could be 100 times worse. We could be in the dark ages right now. Like,
That's right.
you know, like we could be, I'd be fucking killing each other because we think you're a witch. Like,
That's
like
right.
anything is possible.
Yeah, that's right. So I think it is becoming more and more highlighted that people just want. I think that's what I call the majority of. I think us people here that are trying to trade are trying to escape the matrix as such. So if you just want to be a battery in the matrix, it's very predictable. You have your set income, you have your set rise of your wage each year, you have your mortgage, and you pay it off each year. Like it's very, very structured, and trying to escape that is very difficult. So because we kind of live in the Black Swan world and such, we're living in that type of, like all those people that lost their houses, they were just trying to just do the right thing as they were told to do through the schooling system. So it's just interesting, isn't it? So
Yeah, it's
to try
fascinating.
to get your brain out of that. So
I feel like trading and specifically learning to think in probabilities has really been like getting out of the matrix. It's like now that I've learned to look at the world this way, I see it in everything. And so I feel like everyone else doesn't recognize that they live in this fucking chaos. And there's this thin veil between what they think is really going on around them and the truth of reality. It's so interesting.
yeah, I think that's where, like, I still go back to risk, and I really like the point that Robert made around risk management, because that was something that I didn't think about. Was when you do a risk assessment as such, you do try to think of black swan events. What's something that could happen that we can't predict? And then you put a probability to that. And when the probability is so low, you then don't really need to address it, but at least you thought about it, because you go, oh shit, if that happened, then 100 people die. Well, we might have to put something in place to not do that. So I did like that analogy that he used, because yeah, it is good to kind of, we used to call it brainstorming. You know, you just kind of daydream about what could happen, and sometimes things come in that you never thought of, and it's quite powerful to do that. So
very cool.
But
anyway, does anybody else got anything else we want to discuss, share? It can be about anything trading related. It doesn't have to be about the book. Anything else?
I'm gonna jump back in really quick if you guys don't mind.
Do it.
I think one of the biggest things right now that we're experiencing is, we're living in a very polarized world where, from a macroeconomic standpoint, I mean, we potentially have a black swan event at any time, from the Russian conflict to the dollar collapsing to Chinese taking over the world economic. I mean, I've always sit back and try to wonder what people felt like in World War I or World War II before these events took hold. And unfortunately, I believe we're living in similar times, and we could definitely take advantage of kind of stepping back and looking, similar to what you just mentioned, Charles, that everybody's just kind of living in their own bubble and ignoring the world. I guess ignorance is bliss. But ultimately, I truly believe that, the dollar could potentially collapse. I think that is the end goal. I think Chinese, the Russians, whoever it may be, I think they're gearing up. And right now, as you can see, everything, all economies around the world being squeezed from the dollar increasing in value in the last year alone, 23%. So I definitely think at this time, we may be living in challenging times moving forward, especially if you live in the United States.
See, I would take the opposite end of that and say, with all the potential worse outcomes that I see, probably being in the United States is the best place to be. Like we're the best position to handle what's going to happen,
Until the dollar goes away and it's no longer the reserve currency. Then, unfortunately, I don't know, hyperinflation may take hold. I mean, we're no different than Germany after World War II.
Yeah, but our system is so much safer than everybody else's. The whole rest of the world will collapse first before we do. We're very independent. We're able, like our demographics, we're able to provide for ourselves much better than most of the rest of the world. They're more tied to each other than we are to them, if that makes sense. Economically.
True, and I agree with you from the economic standpoint, but we got to I look at the resources, the allocation of resources from the manufacturing standpoint. We don't manufacture hardly anything in the United States anymore, and all our manufacturing sector has been gutted for years. And I truly believe that once people say, you know what, time to exchange goods and services with another currency, I think that's when we're going to start hurting the United States. And I hope I hope it doesn't happen, but it'll be a challenging time moving forward.
No doubt. Buy Bitcoin.
I'm more of a gold and silver person.
No, dude, no, that's grandpa's money. You got to buy the young people's money.
I grew up in a communist country, and silver is something that kind of stuck with me. I was born and raised in Romania, and after the revolution, when the currency turned to shit, silver was what people actually traded. Food, gold, and silver. That was the means of exchange.
No, I hear you. I guess the argument, not that we should start talking about crypto, but I guess the argument of crypto is it's that same idea, but in a digital form, which is easier to transport than, I mean, silver's very heavy, you know?
It's all good.
All right. Anyone else? Anything you guys want to talk about while we're here?
Yeah, I'll put my 2 cents in.
Go for it, Chris.
One of the things that I've been learning is, which I watched probably the, I don't know, first 20 minutes of it. I never actually ended up finished watching the full thing yet, but was your interview with Corbs, right? It's Corbs, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. One of the things you had said in there was, or, you know, kind of stressed was just watch the market and let it give you what it's going to give you. You know what I mean? Don't, because that's something I used to do a lot, is I used to force trades and, you know, whatever, and this has got to happen, whatever. And I got I got away from that a lot. And there's you know, with the whole Black Swan thing, yeah, I didn't read the book either, but just from what your introduction to it was, I got it. I got the basics out of it. Yeah, I mean, anything can happen. There's you know, with the whole COVID thing, and we're not even, I still don't think we're on the road to recovery from that with the markets and stuff. So, you know, my retirement fund, both of them, I have funds that follow the S&P. So they're, you know, huge hits right now. Now I know, yeah, eventually time they'll come back, but no, nobody could have predicted that. There's no way, and shit happens, and it's not the first time this has happened in the world. It's not going to be the last one. So you just, you know, I just kind of take it for what it is, and, you know, my trading is, you know, keeping me somewhat afloat. So, you know, it's nice when you can short the market, because the fund I'm in ain't shorting the market.
Yeah.
But
so do you think about now, like, if you could replay, obviously you can't go back in time, if you could go back to those last few weeks when we were making all-time highs and we were like really like struggling to keep the momentum going, like, would you think about just buying a couple of puts in your you know, your investment account, your retirement account, to cover those losses if the market pulled back? Is that something you would consider for next time?
No, because one, I know absolutely nothing about options. And I don't deal with them. I mean, my retirement funds, I don't trade my retirement fund. I trade my personal money. I would never risk that amount, although actually it might not be all that bad of an idea right now. But
right. The idea is, like, when the market was at all-time highs, if you spent a little bit of your profits, if you took a little bit of the money that you had made on the way up and bought a few puts, you'd made a ton of profits off them now, and you could be buying more shares now while it's cheaper. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I don't know anything about that. Now, you know, there's a guy I work with that deals with markets, and he's always, you know, like giving me stuff from, like, you know, because he plays around with it with stocks, and you know, he'll give me stuff from like Goldman Sachs, you know, these printouts and stuff. I'm like, I don't want to know any of this, because it's just going to cloud my brain. I'm on a track for what I'm doing, and the way after taking your course and the stuff that I've learned from you is changed my theory so much. That's why I think, and hey, it could be a fluke, it may not be, but for the last 25 days, I ain't got no complaints. It's working. I may be, like today, I said, I could be leaving some stuff on the table, but I got over that fear. I used to sit there and think, oh my God, there's money on the table. I got to go chasing after it. I got to get it. Well, I'm not anymore. And that's why I just haven't had the last time I had a red day was September 20th. It's just, I don't have to be up a ton, but I also am not down a ton. I've had 2 bad days where I ended up breaking even. The only thing I lost was the commissions, but it's just because I'm just, those were kind of just days that I'm calling them flukes because I was getting a little cocky,
Uh-huh.
and I was going back to my old ways where I was forced and stuff, and it doesn't, I'm trying to keep it as simple as possible, because for me and what my goal is hopefully in 3 years, you'll see me on Discovery Channel in the backwoods of West Virginia in the mountains hunting Bigfoot, living off the land, or I'm going to be sitting on Kentucky Lake with my nice little piece of property and just fishing and leaving it at that.
Hoping
I don't-
Bigfoot comes to you, obviously.
Exactly. I don't want any of this complicated stuff, and I'm not. I've spent tens of thousands of dollars on programs and all these systems and indicators and stuff. And I tell you one thing, that $110 was the best money I ever spent in my life, because with your course, because it was just like, oh my God, this doesn't, I don't have to be looking at all these different things. The only thing I have to do is just look at this freaking chart, and it's telling you, like you said, what is the market trying to do and how good of a job is it doing?
Mhm.
And as soon as you can figure that out, you don't have, if you shoot for 100 points a day, you'll be lucky if you get 5. If you shoot for 10 points a day, you're going to get 20.
Mhm.
So
No, I love that. It's one of those things. The more I'm learning about teaching people is that you can't convince them of something. You can just plant a seed. You can just say like, hey, here's a piece of information, but until like you're now describing, it clicks for you. The idea that like, no, all the noise and all the bells and whistles and all the everything, it's not actually helping. It's the simplifying that actually helps. Like, people just have to figure that out themselves. It's the weirdest thing,
Yeah.
But I'm glad you did it. I'm glad you found that edge.
Yeah. I mean, aside, right now, the only thing I had to pay for because I got NT8 was a TPO chart that does have the letter C in it.
Oh yeah.
Because their version doesn't. So that kicks everything back. But other than that, I have like maybe 5 indicators, and that's it. And they're all free. They're, all the, like I said, all those tens of thousands of dollars you spent on all these bullshit systems and all that other crap. It's like, it was a total fucking waste until, like you said, it finally clicked where I'm like, oh shit, I do way overcomplicated, man. I don't way overcomplicated. So
there you go. I love it.
So that's my 2 cents.
Perfect. Well, thank you for sharing.
You bet.
All right. We have one person still on the YouTube. I assume it's RK. Hey, RK. Do you have anything you want to share? Doesn't look like it. How about you guys? Anything else? Any famous last words you want to get in there?
I'm gonna jump in again really quick, kind of tie it all in together. I think the last piece of the book, don't run for trains. I mean, that really kind of stuck with me, because that's my trading style altogether. I used to overtrade something was similar to Chris said. I was to be eager, trying to chase the market. Felt like I always had that sense of urgency to get into a trade, so I could make money, until I finally, took a step back and implemented my no more than 5 or 4 trades per day rule. And that's where that I don't run for trains kind of just resonated with me. As I try to sit all day, patient, let the trade come to me, and then take advantage of the opportunity when it presents itself. So,
100%. I completely agree. It's the chasing is not the result you want. The result is when the trade comes to you.
Yeah.
All right, guys. Oh, Ben, go for it.
Just to finish, yeah, I've tried to stop over trading as well, which I can do easily, but I've almost got too far the other way now, where I'm just not pulling the trigger at all on anything. So it's kind of become a bit of a fun situation to work through. But I just wanted to say, yeah, thanks for organizing this, and it's good to have a little bit of a accountability to read a book. I do. Let's be honest, I listen to books, but I can also listen to a lot of podcasts and different things. And books are good because it hammers home a theory a bit more than a highlight reel of a podcast. But no, I do appreciate you putting one up, and I look forward to the next one. And it's a bit like homework, but it's kind of keeping me accountable to get through it. So I think that's been good, and it certainly keeps my mind a bit more focused on something. And next call, I'll probably make a few more notes on the book as I read it, so I can add a bit more value to the call. I know the structure of it. So.
Sweet. Yeah. And we won't do another Taleb book next time. So it'll be a lot easier.
Yeah.
But anyway, all right, guys, thank you so much. This was awesome. I really appreciate it. Check out your emails tomorrow, and I will send you a thing to vote for the book for next month. All right. Thank you very much. Cheers, guys.
Thanks, Charles.
Thank you. Must be you. Have a good night.
Yeah, you too. Bye-bye.